first we bring you some breaking news this hour. And Palestine is reported to have reinstated its ambassador to Pakistan, who had shared the stage with Jamaat al-Dawa chief Hafiz Saeed at a public rally last month. According to a famous Pakistani cleric, Tahir Aharafi, he had requested for his reinstatement, and the Palestinian government has told him that he would be sent back next Wednesday. Ambassador Walid Abu Ali had last month attended a gathering in Rawalpindi's Liaquat Bagh under the banner of Difa-e-Pakistan Council and a grouping of jihadi parties. The rally had been called in support of the Palestinian cause. India had strongly objected to the ambassador's presence at the rally, and Palestine had thereafter recalled their ambassador. Should I go? And right now we're joined by my colleague Mohammed Saleh in the WION newsroom. Saleh, I would like to ask you if you can just bring us up to speed on what has happened here.
Absolutely, indeed, Vaishali. Now, all of this has to be looked into a context of what has been happening ever since the 6th of December, when Donald Trump came up with his controversial decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Now, no US president had done this so far, although several US presidents in the past had stated quite clearly that this is something that they would look into. But Donald Trump, as a part of his presidential campaign, had said that if he were to be elected the president, then he will, of course, choose Jerusalem and recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Now, what has happened is this. In the aftermath of this decision that was announced by Donald Trump, there has been widespread outrage, and the Palestinian envoy in Pakistan, Walid Abu Ali, he has shared the stage along with Hafiz Saeed. Immediately in the aftermath of that, India said, look, we have supported the Palestinians at virtually every international forum, despite the fact that India could well have gone along with the Americans and the Israelis in this case. This is something that is being viewed as a betrayal. And what has happened today? This announcement by the Palestinian Authority that they'll reinstate this person, this individual who had no qualms in sharing the stage with Hafiz Saeed, is something that India looks at as almost a sort of a backstabbing incident. Immediately after this incident of the Palestinian envoy sharing the stage with Hafiz Saeed came up, India had registered its protest. At that time, the Palestinian Authority had said that we regret what has happened. It is a mistake. It is an inadvertent mistake and not a deliberate one. And they had immediately recalled this individual from the position of being an ambassador to Pakistan. And what has happened today is something that beggars belief. It's not very clear as to what exactly is the sequence of events that has led to his reinstatement. But at this point of time, it's something which the Indian government will be taking very, very seriously indeed, Vaishali. And also, on this broadcast, we are joined in by my colleague Archana Solanki as well. Archana, WION had, of course, exposed the fact that this individual, Walid Abu Ali, when he had shared the stage, he'd come out and said, look, I was not aware as to who this individual was. I was not aware as to who Hafiz Saeed was. And WION, of course, at that time expressed, had shown that Walid Abu Ali did indeed know Hafiz Saeed, because there is this video of him having shared the stage with Hafiz Saeed from the month of December. Does it surprise you at all, Archana, as to what has happened in this case?
Saleh, as you rightly pointed out, that WION was the first channel to expose Palestinian ambassadors and Pakistan government's lies, that this was the first communication that was established between Hafiz Saeed and the ambassador. Let me point out what the Indian government's reaction was. Remember, on 30th of December 2017, the Indian government has released a very hard-hitting and concerned statement saying that the government of India has strongly conveyed to the Palestinian side that the Palestinian ambassador in Pakistan's association with terrorist Hafiz Saeed, who was proscribed by the United Nations at that event, is unacceptable. The concerns were conveyed both in New Delhi to the Palestinian ambassador and in Ramallah to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates in the state of Palestine. Right. Remember, back then, the Palestinian side had also reciprocated by assuring India that action will be taken, that the country deems it fit, and the appropriate action will be taken. And this statement was on 30th of December. And today is 7th of January. You can count the number of days and see how soon and how long it took for the country to backtrack on its assurance.
Absolutely, indeed, Archana. Do continue to stay on with us. Meanwhile, I'm told that we're also joined in by Taha Siddiqui, our bureau chief from Islamabad. Taha, in the immediate aftermath of, this revelation coming forth that Walid Abu Ali had shared the stage with Hafiz Saeed, Indian government had protested with the Palestinian Authority, and he had immediately been recalled from his position as being the ambassador to Pakistan. What has changed from then and now? In just a matter of few days, why has the Palestinian Authority gone back? Do we have information on that?
Well, basically, from what we know right now, Tahir Ashrafi, who's the head of the Islamic cleric movement in Pakistan, he's the one who requested the Palestinian government to send him back, saying that he had done nothing wrong. So perhaps it seems like the ambassador had connections in Pakistan with the clergy and with the clerical sort of, lobbies here who have linkages to Palestine, and they were the ones who requested his return. So we're being told that he will be coming back to the country.
Right, Taha, let me just interrupt you there, because I'm also told that we're joined in by Mr. Arsalan Bhatti, who is a senior journalist from Karachi, who's joining us on this broadcast. Mr. Bhatti, did it come as a surprise at all that Walid Abu Ali, who had been removed from his position of being the ambassador of Palestine in Pakistan, was first recalled and now has been reinstated back as the ambassador?
Look, this is the all the decision was taken by the Palestinian government to recall their ambassador, and after briefing or debriefing, he will be sent back. He's coming to Pakistan back in next couple of days. This is all due to the Palestine and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs between it already, because there was a picture came out when Palestinian ambassador was seen sitting with Hafiz Muhammad Saeed. And they wanted to learn the first-hand, get the first-hand information about Hafiz Saeed, what he was doing with the ambassador, or what ambassador was doing with him. So after going back to Palestine, the ambassador gave his clarification to what he was doing with Hafiz Saeed, and now after the clarification, he was coming back. And already the Foreign Office of Islamabad was already in contact with the Palestinian embassy in Islamabad and even the Palestinian government in Palestine.
Right, but Mr. Bhatti, just to pursue a bit further on this, first the Palestinian ambassador to Pakistan, Walid Abu Ali, he was recalled as soon as India raised the protest. Now, do you not think that there is a bit of a flip-flop on the part of the Palestinian Authority in this case? Because first they admitted regret. They said that this was a mistake which happened inadvertently, and now he's being sent back. Do you not think that there is a sort of a mismatch in terms of what their intent had been and what they've ended up doing today?
Yes, he was called. He had, I think the ambassador of Palestine had no knowledge that Mr. Hafiz Saeed was under house arrest for the last 8 months. And now, after getting recalling back to his country, the Foreign Office of Palestine had very clearly told him that he should not met any person who was under question in Pakistan, rather under vigilance in Pakistan. Therefore, after assuring his government, he is coming back on the next couple of days, rather a couple of hours. So now he had cleared his mind. Therefore, he is coming back to Pakistan now.
Fair enough, Mr. Arsalan Bhatti. Thank you very much indeed for having joined us on this broadcast. Taha, do continue to stay on with us. Before I come to you, let me just take a quick reaction from my colleague Archana Solanki, who is still with us. Archana, the fact of the matter is, India had voted along with several other countries against the United States and Israel for Palestine. India had said that it will base its policy, which will be an independent one and not determined by what Israel or America has to say. And now, with this reinstatement of this ambassador who shared the stage with Hafiz Saeed, does this not come as a sort of a betrayal for India on the part of the Palestinian Authority?
It does, Saleh. And remember, when India voted in favor of Israel, against the US as far as Jerusalem issue was concerned, a lot of voices were raised against the Indian government and the decision to isolate Israel, its long-term and very close ally. Back then, and immediately after that, when the Palestinian ambassador was seen sharing stage with global terrorist Hafiz Saeed, and the mastermind who is accused of plotting the murder of over 160 Indian nationals and foreign nationals in that Mumbai terror attack, a lot of voices, a lot of chorus was growing against this particular decision by the Indian government at the United Nations. And now, when we see that the decision to reinstate the ambassador is back in the headlines, we have to wait and watch how the emir responds.
Archana, let me just interrupt you. I'm told that we're also joined in by strategic affairs expert and someone who's an expert in Pakistan affairs, Sushant Sareen, who's joined us on this broadcast. So before I just come to you, let me read out the statement that was in fact put out by Sushma Swaraj in the immediate aftermath of the Palestinian Authority recalling this ambassador. The statement said, the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates has stressed on the commitment of the state of Palestine and the keenness to maintain strong and friendly relations with the Republic of India, as well as its support to the efforts made by the Republic of India in its war against terrorism. Now, this was the statement that was put out by the Indian External Affairs Ministry, where the Palestinian Authority had expressed regret at a mistake which they said had happened inadvertently. How do you read this present development where the Palestinian Authority has reinstated the ambassador who had shared the stage with Hafiz Saeed in Pakistan?
See, quite clearly, the Palestinians have cocked a snook at India. And it was very clear that the initial, the take of the Palestinian Authority, that this was a mistake, was utter nonsense. Now, if an ambassador in Pakistan doesn't know who Hafiz Saeed is and presents himself in the company of a rogues gallery, which was there at that particular meeting, then, he's either extremely stupid or he's trying to become completely disingenuous by doing what he was doing. And for the Palestinians to then plead ignorance, I think smacks of utter lies. Nothing more, nothing less. And for India to simply let, matters rest where they were was a mistake. We should have ensured that this kind of a thing, the Palestinians were apologetic rather than just saying that we didn't know what the hell happened. Clearly they knew they were in the company of terrorists and that is what they want to do. So I think we should use this opportunity to recalibrate and reevaluate our entire position on this whole Palestinian question. There is nothing that we have to show for it. And our relations with the rest of the Arab world do not depend any longer on what our position on the issue of Palestine is.
Absolutely.
I don't see any reason why we should get involved in it. And our relation with the Arabs now is a mutually beneficial relationship. They benefit as much from us as we benefit from our relationship with them. So to think that we will jeopardize our relationship with the Arab world or with the rest of the Islamic world simply because we change or we nuance our policy on Palestine, I think it's an assumption which will not hold any water any longer. And if the Palestinians have given us an opportunity to actually, renew our policy and, completely reevaluate it, then I think we should do it now.
Mr. Sareen, do you think it was a mistake on the part of India to have voted against the US proposal to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel?
I think it was a mistake on our part. We were being very presumptuous. After all, the US has not said where exactly its embassy is going to be placed. Now, the US embassy could be in West Jerusalem, which is very much a part of Israel. Or it could be in East Jerusalem, which then changes a lot of things. But that is a decision which the US had to take. And I don't see any reason why we should poke our nose into affairs which really do not concern us. And I don't see any reason why we should take up cudgels on behalf of somebody like the Palestinians who socket us in the eye for the sake, for their sake, and against a country like Israel, which has been a very loyal and true friend to us, and a country like the US, which is a potential ally with whom we have a lot more to gain with a close relationship. I see no reason why we should have taken that position in the first place.
Right. And also, Mr. Sushant Sareen, the ambassador to India, the Palestinian Authority's ambassador to India, had announced in the month of December that Prime Minister Modi will travel to Palestine. Do you think, in the backdrop of what has happened, that visit will that fructify?
Well, ideally it should not. I think the Prime Minister's office and the Ministry of External Affairs should immediately announce that that visit has been called off.
Right.
After all, if the Prime Minister still goes and visits, then that means that he is, he's giving a nod to countries that you can flirt with terrorists who attack India, you can hobnob with them, you can conspire with them, you can slap us in the face, and there will be absolutely no consequences that you will have to bear because of it. So I think unless the government wants to give that message to the rest of the world and completely shoot its anti-terrorism policy in the head, I don't see any reason why the Prime Minister or how the Prime Minister's visit to Palestine can be tenable anymore. I think it will be completely untenable. And perhaps the government should realize it sooner rather than later. And even if the Palestinians were to now again step back on this particular issue, I think the visit is infructuous and it should not happen.
Absolutely, indeed. Do continue to stay on with us, Mr. Sushant Sareen. Meanwhile, I'm told that we're also joined in by our associate editor, Palki Sharma Upadhyay, who's tracking all the developments very closely. Palki, how do you read this latest development where the Palestinian Authority has reinstated the very ambassador who had shared this stage with Hafiz Saeed in Pakistan?
It is very hard to understand, first of all, why a diplomat would do what he did and why a government would call him back and now reinstate him. So I think the Palestinian Authority would be in the best position to explain their actions. But how should India see it is an important question. And this is the timing is also significant. You know, in about 10 days from now, the Israeli Prime Minister will be in New Delhi.
Absolutely.
And there were reports of whether that visit would be cancelled after India's vote, etc. That is not going to happen. But you have to remember, Saleh, the fact that India was the first non-Arab country to recognize the Palestinian Authority. And India has always voted in favor of Palestine. And for the Palestinian Authority to make moves like this, for one of their diplomats to be seen alongside Hafiz Saeed, and some reports say that this wasn't the first time, that this has happened in the past. And I've spoken to some ambassadors who know this man, who say that this may have been an error of judgment. But it cannot be happening repeatedly. So
that is true, Palki, because WION had in fact put out this video which clearly showed that the Palestinian ambassador to Pakistan clearly knew who Hafiz Saeed was. He had met him before, he had shook hands with him before, and for him to pretend that he was not aware as to who Hafiz Saeed was simply did not add up. Now, going forward, how do you think this reinstatement of this ambassador to Pakistan is likely to play out in the relationship between India and the Palestinian Authority? Will India now revisit some of the policies that it has had in the past in terms of the Palestinian Authority?
India has already taken a very, very strong and historic decision, if I may. When the Prime Minister went to the region and went to Tel Aviv, went to Jerusalem and did not go to Ramallah, that was a statement. That was a huge statement. And that was within weeks of the Palestinian leadership coming to India. So that dehyphenation itself was a big deal. What is important to note, Saleh, here is that foreign policy cannot be like a knee-jerk, you did this to me, so I will do this to you. That is how experts say that is how this works. You have to look at the long term. And in India's foreign policy in particular has become independent of what others say. India is now looking at what suits it. More than principle, it is pragmatism that is guiding what India does, which is what perhaps explains how the June and July events happened, and then how India voted on the Jerusalem issue at the United Nations.
Right.
So these things are independent of each other. You are a strategic ally. We'll deal with you on issues of strategy, but this is our position on X subject and this is our position on Y subject, and these two are mutually independent. So that is how India is playing it. What is India going to do in response? It's very hard to say as of this point.
Absolutely, indeed. Do continue to stay on with us, Palki. Meanwhile, we are still joined in by Sushant Sareen, who is an expert on Pakistan affairs. Mr. Saeed, how do you think India should respond to this? I mean, we put out a very strong objection to the fact that he had met Hafiz Saeed, he'd shared this stage with Hafiz Saeed, but after this, what many people would call is essentially a betrayal. Now, this is deliberate, this was not an inadvertent mistake. The fact that he's been reinstated as the ambassador of Palestinian Authority in Pakistan, how should India react to this?
I think we should react very strongly. I don't think we should simply let this pass. And I don't see any reason why, because to do that would actually mean that, we don't take our own position on the issue of Pakistani export of terrorism seriously. Or our position on the issue of state sponsorship of terrorism by countries like Pakistan and others seriously. Now, if that is the impression we want to give, then sure, we can just let this pass. But I don't think that will be a tenable position for this government to take. I think they will be held to pay if the Prime Minister now, in spite of this kind of action from the Palestinian side, the Prime Minister decides that he would still continue with his schedule and visit, Ramallah. I think they would be shooting themselves in the foot, both politically, diplomatically, and in the security domain. Who will take India seriously after that? And the fact that, and Palki is right, that while there has been reports that this fellow has been hobnobbing with some of these terrorists in the past, I think it is the occasion that at a time when India went out on a limb for these fellows, which India should not have, and yet, the Palestinians thought it fit to stick with the terrorists of the Hafiz Saeed and the rest of the Defy Pakistan Council rogues gallery. And not exercise better judgment. And I don't think it was a question of bad judgment. I think it was a deliberate move. There is no way that any ambassador in Pakistan cannot know who a man like Hafiz Saeed or the rest of that bunch of terrorists who are there on that stage, who those people are. And for them to be seen in their company means that they simply don't give a damn about what the rest of the international opinion is on the issue of terrorism. So unless, we ourselves don't give a damn about what international terrorism is all about, and we want to remain open to this kind of terrorism, I think the government of India must take a very, very strong stand on this. They must take an extremely dim view of what has happened. And the very first thing they should do is call off the visit of the Prime Minister. And then, of course, there would be a whole lot of other things that the government of India can do in terms of some economic assistance, scholarships, all sorts of other things which are given to the Palestinians. I think we can stop giving all of that to them.
Right.
And there is no reason why we should anymore.
Absolutely, indeed. Right. Do continue to stay on with us, Mr. Sushant Sareen. I'm told that we are also joined in by Mr. T.P. Srinivasan, who is a former ambassador who's joining us over the phone line. Mr. Srinivasan, how do you view this reinstatement of an ambassador who had shared the stage with Hafiz Saeed, who at that time Palestinian Authority had accepted was an inadvertent mistake for which he had been removed from his position at that point of time and now has been reinstated? Is there something that's gone seriously wrong in terms of how foreign policy has been conducted between India and the Palestinian Authority?
No, I don't think so. I have a feeling that it is normally a gesture. When you recall an ambassador, it is just a gesture that he has made a mistake. But that doesn't mean that he will not come back.
Right.
Because, so that's very normal in diplomatic life. Because the man has to come and pack and say farewells and all that. And so I think we should take a very sympathetic view of this. When the immediate recall was to show their disapproval of what he had done.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that he should be, thrown out forever or he should not be allowed to go back and all that. I think we should take a more sympathetic view.
But Mr. Srinivasan, the fact that he's been recalled in less than a fortnight after he was recalled clearly does not speak well in terms of the action that has been taken against him. He clearly knew who Hafiz Saeed was. He chose to share the stage with him. And India has, of course, gone out on a limb for the Palestinian cause, and they've voted, against the United States and Israel in the United Nations. And, does that in some way not smack of betrayal on the part of the Palestinian Authority here?
No, 128 countries voted against the United States and for Palestine. So what is India going out of a limb and so on? No, not really. It's our policy, general policy of support to Palestine that we did that. We didn't do anything exceptional.
We did not do anything exceptional. The fact of the matter is India's relationship with the US and Israel has been getting more warmer by the day, if one could so put it. And in this, India chose to go against the tide.
No, not at all. In fact, European allies of the United States, many of them voted against, except Canada and Australia.
Right.
Everybody else voted for the Palestinian resolution. So there is nothing, and this should be taken in our stride. These are not things on which we should take, strong action or anything of that kind. Our policy about Palestine is as old as Pandit Mahatma Gandhi. And it is not going to irritate our relations with Israel in any way. Israel itself has taken it coolly.
But do you not think the fact that India voted against this decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, does this not vitiate in some way the growing, good relationship that we have with Israel and America?
No, this is a matter of principle. We did not do it in order to please the Palestinians.
Right.
It's a matter that the whole international community has recognized, and what we did was the right thing to do.
Okay.
Whether the Palestinians acknowledge it and whether they try to be more friendly for us or grateful to us, etc. That's a different issue. That we can deal with the Palestinians. The message has gone clearly to them. That is so wrong.
The message has gone, you feel, to the Palestinian Authority. Let me get Sushant Sareen in on this. Sushant, you heard what Mr. T.P. Srinivasan had to say. Look, the ambassador was recalled and now he can be reinstated. It's not as if he could be punished forever.
That was an IOSH action on certain sensitive issues. Would the ambassador be caught hobnobbing with people who are involved with the Al-Qaeda or with the Islamic State? Will we then take a dim view? At what point of time will we start taking a dim view of these things? And at what point of time will we put our foot down? Now, if it doesn't make like I said,
that's an important point, Sushant. That's an important point that you've raised. Now, Mr. Srinivasan, let me actually bring you in on this. The person that he met is Hafiz Saeed, the mastermind of the Mumbai terror attack. India has taken a very strong view of this. This is a person who's responsible for the deaths of 157 people in the city of Mumbai. So should the Palestinian ambassador have shared the stage with him, and should he have now been reinstated by the Palestinian Authority?
No, he should not have attended. That's obvious. Otherwise, why did the Palestinian Authority withdraw him? So that's a symbolic act. What he did was unacceptable. So symbolic action was taken to recall him. But that doesn't mean that he may have gone there temporarily to wind up and come back and things like that.
Right.
So we should not take a very serious view of that. The Palestinian Authority has already recognized the fact that the India sensitive has been taken into account. And I think this is a well-known, well-established diplomatic practice to do that.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that we should, forever be angry with the Palestinians and so on. I wouldn't take a view like that.
You would not take a hard view on this. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. T.P. Srinivasan, for having joined us and having given us your inputs. Palki, let me come to you on this. We just heard what Srinivasan had to say. He's an ambassador before, he's a diplomat. He says, look, India has expressed its displeasure with what had happened, and now the man has been punished, and now he can be reinstated. Do you agree with that?
Agree with that, but what I can do as a journalist is give you an insight, Saleh, into what may have led to this decision. I've been in touch with the Palestinian leadership, and as of Friday, I can tell you that the Palestinian Foreign Minister, Mr. Riyad al-Maliki, was in India.
Right.
He was visiting India. I cannot say for sure if he had any meetings with the Indian leadership, but I'm sure a lot of back-channel discussion happened. I can also tell you that before the United Nations vote, representatives of the Arab countries, including the Arab League, met formally the Indian the people from the MEA and the leadership in the MEA. By leadership, I mean the political leadership, to request India to take a broader view of the situation there and to vote against America and Israel, saying that India has had a historic position that it should not give away. Now, I'm not saying that India was swayed by this, but I'm sure India took into account the sentiment. India
Correct.
also saw how America's traditional allies, i.e. the EU and other countries, are taking an independent view of what America is doing in Jerusalem, and India then eventually decided. So the point I'm trying to make is that while we see what's happening outside, that a leader is or a diplomat is called back and then he's reinstated, there is a lot that is going on behind the scenes.
Right.
And this may have contributed. I'm assuming that some sort of an assurance, and this is pure speculation, but I can say for a fact that the Palestinian leadership was here, the foreign minister was in India, and being in India, he would have got in touch with someone from the Indian side, that some sort of an assurance was given. I don't know what that assurance was. I don't know how strong enough was that, and if that was enough to give India the confidence that sending this man back wouldn't change the relations. I'm guessing that is the calculation.
Are you suggesting that the Indian government was in the know that this man, Walid Abu Ali, who had shared the stage with Hafiz Saeed, was likely to be reinstated?
I cannot say that for sure. That is the most honest answer. What I can say is that the Palestinian foreign minister was in India. And this was, 24 hours before this decision was taken. So I'm guessing that he spoke to someone in the Indian leadership. I don't know if the Indian government said it's okay. I don't even know if the Indian government was in on the decision or was told well in advance that, look, we're going to do this. This shouldn't affect our relationship. What I'm saying is that there was a reach out from the Palestinian side to the Indian side.
There was a reach out from the Palestinian side to the Indian side. Do continue to stay on with us, Palki. Meanwhile, we still have Mr. Sushant Sareen on us with us. Mr. Sareen, now that the reinstatement of Walid Abu Ali has taken place, it is quite possible that the Indian government may have been in the know that this was an action that was likely to happen. Do you agree with what TP Srinivasan, the ambassador, said a little while ago, that maybe, in diplomatic ways of engagement between nations, it's possible that a man may have erred, but he could be reinstated if he has apologized and has said that, look, it was not the intention to try and make relationships with India worse, that the Palestinian ambassador was there in Pakistan sharing the stage with Hafiz Saeed. Do you think that India would take a softer view in terms of what has happened today?
Well, India can take a softer view if India is not serious about protecting its own interests. Frankly, India has been remiss plenty of times in the past in actually protecting or ensuring that its red lines are respected.
Right.
Now, we want to, erase yet another red line. Nobody can stop us if we want to destroy our own country. Who can, after all, stop us from doing that?
Okay.
Now, for the ambassador to say that, they didn't know, I don't accept that. And for India to say, okay, fine, he made a mistake, let's excuse him. It was, how do you judge somebody's intention? What is the parameter on the basis of which you judge intentions? I think it is about time we stop talking about intentions and we start talking about actions. And the actions were clearly something which went against India's interests. And this is something we should put our foot down very strongly and make an example of these people. And for the Palestinians to come and offer the Arabs, as Palki was very rightly saying that, yes, they were lobbying for India's vote, which is okay, fine. I don't have any problem if India voted for the Arabs, but what was the quid pro quo from the Arab side on matters of core interest to us? Or was it just a one-way street that they requested us that because, like Ambassador Srinivasan was saying, that, some 80 years back, Mahatma Gandhi took a certain position. Mahatma Gandhi took a certain position on 50 other things. Do we follow all of those?
Fair point.
Because times have moved on. And if Mahatma Gandhi is the cutoff point of history for Ambassador Srinivasan, then I could go back maybe 1,000 years back and say that my cutoff point of history is that, and so maybe we should do what we were doing 1,000 years back. This is
fair point, Mr. Sareen.
Judge the relationships on the basis of here and now and the future, not the past.
Absolutely. So decisions will have to be taken in terms of the actions that have happened in the last few weeks. Let's bring in our bureau chief from Islamabad, Taha Siddiqui, who's still with us. Taha, this is an interesting development that has taken place, and in Pakistan there has been this guideline that has been issued that charities associated with certain groups that may have terror affiliations, they are being cracked down. Donations cannot be made to them. How is this being viewed? Will this not in some ways also go on and make the position of Hafiz Saeed a bit stronger. This man was removed because he had met Hafiz Saeed and had shared the stage with him, but now he's been reinstated back. How is this being viewed in Pakistan? Taha, if you can hear my question to you was, how is this development, the fact that Walid Abu Ali, who had been removed from the position of being an ambassador to Pakistan, has again now been reinstated? How is this being viewed in Pakistan? Right, we seem to have lost our line with Taha Siddiqui there. We'll try get him back online. But meanwhile, Palki, let me come back to you on this. The Prime Minister of India is slated to stop by at Ramallah, according to sources, on the 15th of February. Do you think this latest development will have some sort of an information in terms of some sort of ramifications in terms of what Prime Minister Narendra Modi may in fact do? Right, I'm told that we've lost the line with Palki. We'll try and get her back online. But Mr. Sushant Sareen, let me come to you on this. You know, these are the visuals that we've got on the screen. The person on the left is Walid Abu Ali, the man who's shared the stage with, you can see him waving there on the stage with Hafiz Saeed. This was a meet, this was a rally that was organized to try and ramp up the support for the Palestinian cause in the aftermath of the Jerusalem decision that had been announced by Donald Trump. Mr. Sareen, how do you view this entire thing in terms of India-Israel relationship? Has India, by backing the Palestinians, shot itself in the foot?
Well, I think the Israelis would probably be quite hurt with what has happened, you know, the way India voted. India had the option of abstaining. It was not necessarily that we voted in favor of a particular resolution. We could have just as well abstained and, you know, delivered a message on that score. So I think the Israelis would have been much happier. And the fact that the Israelis have stuck by us on virtually everything, you know, certainly there should have been a quid pro quo with the Israelis. Now, the Israelis certainly understand that India being India, it has a number of, you know, interests which it also needs to protect. It has a very close relationship with the Arab world. So there are going to be some, you know, differences between India and Israel on how we approach some of the issues, which is quite normal between any two countries.
Right.
So the Israelis would take a somewhat more mature view of that. My question is with my own government's decisions, you know, just sticking on to a legacy which we have inherited over the last 70 years, and in a time, in a day when things have moved on, relationships have transformed, relationships have changed. I don't see why we should remain fixed to certain so-called positions of principle.
Right.
After all, there are principles which we have flouted plenty of times in the past because our interests dictated that maybe we need to compromise with those principles. For example, when the Soviet Union would invaded Czechoslovakia or Hungary, what was the position which was taken by the government of India at that point of time? You know, and those were the Halicon days of Nehru and what have you. So we compromise on principles when it suits our interest. So what is so sacrosanct about this one principle that we cannot have a more nuanced position than what we've had until now?
No, we can have a nuanced position, Mr. Sareen. The betrayal has come in the fact that Walid Abu Ali, the man who shared the stage with Hafiz Saeed, has now been reinstated after the Palestinian Authority expressed regret. They said, look, it was an inadvertent mistake. Meanwhile, I'm told that I'm also joined by my colleague Molly Gambhir. Molly, this is, you know, something that not a lot of people were expecting. Walid Abu Ali had been removed as the ambassador to Pakistan. He's now been reinstated in less than a fortnight. You know, does this come as a surprise at all? And how should India react to this?
Certainly, and that's one of the key aspects, as we've been discussing all along with our experts who've been shedding light on. This raises severe question marks over perhaps the need for explanation that needs to come in from the Palestinian authorities. Saleh, let's also backtrack a little bit and contextualize this for our viewers. And joining us on the broadcast, of course, is also our Pakistan Bureau Chief, Taha Siddiqui, who's been getting us the very latest. Taha, to those uninitiated, to those who might just be tuning in, what do we know so far about the Palestinian ambassador being reinstated after he was recalled for sharing the stage with Hafiz Saeed?
Well, basically, Tahir Ashrafi, who's the head of the Pakistan Ulema Council, which is a religious body that vets Pakistani laws and sort of sees if the laws are Sharia compliant or not. That particular body, the head of it is called Tahir Ashrafi, and that person had requested the Palestinian government, and he has connections with the Palestinian government and the heads of the state in Palestine. And he has claimed in an interview on a local television channel that his request has been approved for the reinstatement of the ambassador to come back and take his duties from Wednesday onwards. So we've been told that from Wednesday, the ambassador who was recalled will continue his duties as regular as he was doing earlier. Now, this particular cleric, he's known to have linkages not just internationally with with Muslim countries, but also at home. He's known to be very connected with organizations which are then linked with militant groups, perhaps, and that is why. So he has a certain clout, and he has said, in his sort of request to the Palestinian government, he told them that what the ambassador here was doing was just, attending a rally that was in solidarity with the Palestinian government. And,
okay.
Then basically the Palestinian government sort of, responded to his request and agreed to send the ambassador back.
All right, stay with me, Taha. Sushant Serene is also with us, sharing his perspectives. Mr. Serene, to what extent do you find this problematic, and at multiple levels do you feel that this raises question marks over the conduct of the Palestinian authorities, at least in the impetus for the reinstatement of this ambassador?
Look, what Taha is saying, Tahir Ashrafi, he is not a heavyweight.
Right.
Okay, literally he is, but actually politically he is not a major, very heavyweight kind of a thing. And the Pakistan Ulema Council, which he heads, it's a bunch of clerics he's got together, which really doesn't add up to anything, because none of the other bigger organizations with much bigger support bases are aligned with him. Taha is right that he does have connections with all sorts of militant groups, especially the Deobandi groups and others, and he has himself been involved in some terrorism, or at least at a political level, in backing many of these terrorist groups, including the Harkatul Ansar and others. But for anybody to think that on the basis of Tahir Ashrafi, an entire policy is going to change, right, and on the basis of what Tahir Ashrafi tells the Palestinians are ready to, show a finger to India, then clearly something is seriously wrong with India's foreign policy as far as Palestine is concerned. Because if on the basis of what Tahir Ashrafi says, the Palestinians are going to change their policy and they are going to kowtow to a man like, onto the request of a man like Tahir Ashrafi, then clearly there is no point having any sort of a relationship. Forget about just being angry with the Palestinians. I think we should close the Palestinian embassy in India as well. I don't see any reason why we should continue to pander to these people anymore. And so it doesn't make any sense to me, really.
And this argument, Mr. Serene, that the Palestinian authorities have been holding on to, that this was an inadvertent error, and the ambassador was not at that point aware of who Hafiz Saeed is. Do you buy that argument?
Absolutely not. Hafiz Saeed is known all over the world. He's a UN designated international terrorist. Now, will tomorrow the Palestinian ambassador be found in the company of the Islamic State or the Al-Qaeda or any other terrorist group simply because he feigns ignorance onto their antecedents or what their profiles are? Clearly, this is not a mistake which can be condoned. If at all it was a mistake, and I don't think it was. I think it was a deliberate action. And just to say that, some terrorist group is organizing a certain rally somewhere on a particular issue which is, relating to Palestine, will the Palestinian ambassador be found out there? Now, if tomorrow the ETIM, which fights in China, the Chinese occupation of Xinjiang, they were to organize some kind of a meeting somewhere, would the Palestinians ever be found out there? They would avoid it like the plague. So what is it And this is a question to old-timers like Ambassador Srinivasan and others who say, no, it's not a big deal, it's a small thing. How come this small thing does not happen when it involves a country like China? Why should it happen to us? It happens to us because we take it. We take it lying down. So somewhere along the line, if you draw a red line, then please stick to that red line. Otherwise, stop drawing red lines.
And also, in terms of his reinstatement, we of course have to wait and watch for that confirmation to come in from the Palestinian authorities. But if that were to be true, if the reinstatement will be carried out, Mr. Serene, what do you think India's next move should be?
I think the first move has to be that the Prime Minister's proposed visit to Ramallah has to be cancelled. He has to make it inconvenient for himself to go and attend out there. He can take a somewhat diplomatic, or he can take a much more forthright view and say that because of what the Palestinians have done, there is no point for the Indian Prime Minister to be seen in the company of the Palestinians at this point in time. That would make our displeasure very, very apparent and very clear. But in addition to that, I think if this man is reinstated, then we have to start changing our entire approach on this whole Israeli-Palestinian question. It is not something which involves us, and there's no reason why we should poke our nose in it. We should stop defending the lost causes of the world. There are the Arab countries and the rest of the Islamic world which continues to hobnob with both the Palestinians and the Israelis. I see no reason why we should get involved in a dispute or an issue which has very little to do with us. Now, there is a body of opinion which says that there are almost 200 million Indian Muslims, and they might have a certain view on this particular issue. But I think we do a great disservice to the Muslims who live in India by attributing extraterritorial loyalties to them over our own national interest. So I think the Muslims in India should and will back India's national interest rather than some pseudo-religious cause or whatever else which we would like to attribute that the Muslims would all be very keen that we have closer relations with Palestine. What does that Indian Muslim have to do with Palestine anyways?
All right, stay with me please, Mr. Serene, and our Pakistan Bureau Chief Hafiz is also back with us. But let me also get in further perspectives from defence analyst PK Sehgal, who's joining us on the broadcast. Good evening, sir. Your first initial remark to the developments as they've panned out. I'm not sure if you've been listening in to the statements and the perspectives that have been shared by the other guests who've been with us on the broadcast. But essentially, to what extent do you find this problematic if the Palestinian ambassador were to be reinstated?
Personally, I think it's a stub to India, and Palestinians have shot themselves in the foot. Despite India's increasing friendship with Israel and America, we voted against the American resolution, thereby showing India's solidarity with Palestine. The Prime Minister is supposed to be going to Palestine the next month. I think India ought to send a very strong message to Palestine by having a re-look at the Prime Minister's visit. Because this is something that was not expected from our nation who is yet to come into being and is wanting India's support to be ultimate. India has always and every time backed Palestine for the last couple of decades. And thereafter, they are doing a thing like this only the indicator of a weird mind. And I think the government of India ought to take it very seriously and react accordingly.
Let's also apprise our viewers. Yes, I'll just come back to you, sir. Let's also apprise our viewers of what the Palestine envoy to India is saying, that there's been no decision as of now on the reinstatement. Let's also understand that this is a development which certainly, as our guests have been pointing out, will demand a relook at the India-Palestine relations if the Palestinian ambassador was indeed to be reinstated. As of now, it's only a Pakistani cleric, Tahir Ashrafi, who has claimed that the Palestinian authorities have agreed to reinstate the Palestinian ambassador to Pakistan, and that will be carried out in a while from now. That's the claim that's been made by the Pakistani cleric. On that note, I do also want to go back to Taha Siddiqui, who's been getting us the very latest on that front. What is the locus standi of this Pakistan Pakistani cleric here, Taha, to help our viewers understand who this cleric is and why and in what capacity he's making this statement and this claim. Taha? All right, we'll just go back to our correspondent Taha Siddiqui while we reconnect that line with him. Mr. Sehgal, as you were just talking about the kind of move that India should make, but to what extent do you think this is also a question mark over the support that India has given out to Palestine? All of this, of course, under the condition that Palestinian authorities are considering reinstating the Palestinian ambassador.
The fact that the statement is being made by the cleric in Pakistan, in actuality, Pakistan has lost credibility both nationally and internationally. To what extent this cleric statement is true is something that we got to watch and wait. If the Palestinian ambassador in New Delhi is saying that he is not aware of a move of this sort, then we need to hold our horses. But should this move come about, wherein he is actually reinstated, then the government of India ought to have a relook and send a very strong message to Palestinians that we mean business. If they do not wish to hold hands of India, and if they don't want to have friendship with us, then we would need to have a relook at the entire question of Palestine as far as India is concerned. We have been supporting them to the hilt. In fact, India is in a position to influence Israel more than any other country in the world as far as Palestine is concerned. And they'll be downright foolish to throw away this option that India has given to them. Today, Israel is not willing to listen to any country. 14th of January, the Israeli Prime Minister is coming to India, and India can actually sow the seed in the mind of the Israeli Prime Minister to go soft on this issue. India has the capacity, India has the necessary moral capability. And this is something that the Palestinians ought to take into consideration. Otherwise, in actuality, they will be shooting in their own foot.
All right, I'll just come back to you, Mr. Sehgal. Mrs. Serene, as we've been continuing to look at what this claim really is all about, a Pakistani cleric making a statement, making a claim such as this, do you also question in what capacity he's making such a claim? Where does the locus standi of this cleric come into the perspective of the larger point of this ambassador being reinstated?
No, see, Tahir Ashrafi, I know the man. Tahir Ashrafi is a guy who has managed to inveigle himself in the, with the establishment in Pakistan, with the political parties, and he has projected himself as some kind of a cat's whiskers who can manage, the religious lobby, who has a line of communication with most of these guys. And then, of course, he also claims that he travels all over the world, and he's very close to the Saudi royal family. He's close to a whole lot of other, Gulf potentates and ambassadors and, presidents and whatever else. Some of it might be, partly true. Some of it is a palpable lie. But that's the way he projects himself. But my question is, number one, if the Palestinians are going to, change their entire approach towards India on the basis of what Tahir Ashrafi says, then the Palestinians are as clueless as their ambassador and are being as disingenuous as their ambassador and are being as stupid as their ambassador in making this kind of a switch. That is point number one. But point number two is that even if this fellow is not being reinstated, the fundamental point which I want to raise is why India should continue to back a policy which is 70 years old, which clearly doesn't seem to be working, which clearly does not necessarily push ahead with our interests, and which clearly, it's seen as a kind of a default position that anything to do with Palestine, the Indian reaction is always going to be the same, which actually pushes us into a kind of a box. And we need to come out of that box because ideally foreign policy and our vote in international forums needs to be leveraged to gain something for ourselves, not to gain something for somebody else. Foreign policy, the primary purpose of foreign policy is to further India's national interests. And if India's national interests demand that sometimes we vote against the Palestinians, then surely, India's national interest must be given primacy over what the Palestinian interest is, number one. Number two, there would be times when we would need to vote against the Israelis because that is what our national interest demands. And the Israelis would understand at that point of time, which is what we should do. But, this free fund, in a sort of a free fund manner, we continue to cast our vote in a sort of a reflex action against Israel at a time when relations are suddenly looking up. We are moving from, strength to strength in our relationship both with Israel and the U.S. To take a position of the sorts we took didn't make any sense to me. Like I said, the least we could have done is abstain. And if we had to vote for the Palestinians, then we should have demanded a quid pro quo from the Arab states on matters of core interest to us, for example, Kashmir.
Okay.
How is it that the Arabs feel that they can blithely ignore India's core interests, vote in favor of Pakistan in the OIC and some of the other forums, and still expect that India will vote the way they ask us to vote? How does that work? There has to be reciprocity on this issue.
All right, we're going to leave it there for the moment. Mr. Serene, appreciate you joining us on the broadcast with all of those perspectives. Important to point out here once again that the Palestine envoy to India has said that there's been no rethink, there's been no decision, no fresh decision when it comes to the ambassador, when it comes to the Palestinian ambassador to Pakistan. Let's play that reaction out for you. Let's take a listen in.
India have a good attitude supporting the Palestinian cause and the two-state solution. And in this matter itself, I have discussed it with some official at the MAA. Mr. Modi will visit Palestine.
All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition for now. We're going to leave it there. Thanking Sushant Serene, PK Sehgal, and our Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui, who joined us on the broadcast with all of those perspectives.